never understand these games, but I'm glad I can watch. That's fair. I think, like, the big appeal of games like these... I think the best way to describe the appeal of them, because, like, on a surface level, it's, like... It's pretty easy for people to call them out for being, like, violence for the sake of violence. Especially this game, where it, like, sells itself on being bloody and ridiculous. But they're all kind of like that. Like, they're all stylish and ridiculous, and... like, a lot of people just kind of look at them as if they're more just like a power trip thing, which I'm sure that is like the main appeal to some people. But for me, a lot of the fun comes from the fact that they're almost like, every encounter is like a puzzle where your timing matters a lot. Your timing and spacing of all the little things that you do can go from feeling like you're just hitting buttons to feeling like you're hitting all the right things at the right time. Which is both fun, because it's fun to figure that kind of thing out. And it also feels really cool, because a lot of the games are like, you know, they do play into the power trip thing, which ultimately means that they make you feel really, like, stylish while you're doing it. Like, weaving in and out of stuff and things like that. And then, fighting games I like for a very similar reason, which is that instead of the puzzle being a group of enemies where all the little enemies have their little patterns and stuff, or movesets that you have to pay attention to, the puzzle is another person and figuring out what they're gonna do. My thing was I never got portable console games. My parents thought it would be distracted by it. That's fair. I remember having a lot of moments growing up of, like, usually I was never fought too hard on it, but there would be, like, Christmases where, like, I would ask for video games. I'd usually at least get, like, a handful of the games that I wanted. But then my grandma would, like, get me, like, a coloring set as a gift and be like, haha, you can do this instead of video games, smile. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I feel like my mom was always, like, mostly, like, approving of it. Because on one hand, it was video games. It was obviously, like, silly games with silly stuff happening, as opposed to honing a skill or whatever, I guess. But I think my mom could tell that, like, just the fact that I was learning something like video games was, like, video games weren't necessarily easy to just all play. And she could tell that it was, like, doing some good stuff to my brain that I was learning them. On top of the fact that, especially with, like, computers and stuff, she was like, I don't know how you're doing all this computer stuff, but if you're doing it for the sake of video games, then they can't be all that bad, right? Yeah, I don't know. I imagine, like, that's, like, a pretty real thing in general, though, that I think... Not that I became some super genius from playing video games or anything, but there's definitely a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people who have, like, started their careers as programmers because they wanted to, like, I don't know, mod a video game, or even just get an emulator to work, and it was just their first step into, like, messing around with stuff and computers, and being like, oh, there's, like, cool technical stuff that you can mess around with if you just know how to do it. I wonder how far this goes. And your child/teenage brain just kind of goes in whatever direction with it.
A long era of silence.
I didn't exactly go into anything as intense as, like, programming or game design or anything, but I'm at least computer literate and visual design literate enough that, like, I feel like I can, you know, I've gotten tech jobs through it. I currently have a design job through it. And it all started with video games, technically speaking. Oh, wait, I guess for a bit of history, and I'm sure I'll reminisce more later if Josh ends up coming on with me. But, like, we've been friends for a long time. Like, since, gosh, I think even, like, early or mid-grade school? And when the 360 came out, I didn't get one, but he got one. And I ended up just kind of hanging out at his house a lot, and we played a bunch of games together that were coming out at the time. You know, that was kind of fun. Growing up, I didn't really own too many of, like, the newer consoles that were coming out ever. So, like, not that I used friends for their consoles, but I kind of depended on friends for their consoles if they had something newer. It was really the only way I got to play, like, you know, Like, at the time that the GameCube was out, I only had, like, an N64 and a PlayStation, etc. So it was really fun to get the chance to, like, hang out at friends' houses and, play the newer, shinier games. It also kind of made it feel like more an event. Which is, I'm sure, like, the same vibe people got, like... The same vibe people got, like, going to the arcades, like, in, like, the 80s and 90s, where it was like, wow, look at this significantly shinier version of the thing that I'm playing at home. So anytime I went to a friend's house that had one of the nicer consoles, I was like, wow! Look at how realistic the Xbox 360 is. Definitely understandably, yeah. Something I actually joke about, well, not, you know, it's not a joke, because it's the truth, but, growing up, I don't think I actually owned a single Super Smash Bros. Game until the Wii U one, which I basically bought a Wii U for, and that's all I used it for. Because, just growing up, I just never had my own Wii. I would always go over friends' houses to use their Wii and play with them, which is, like, especially fine for a fighting game, because obviously you want to play with other people anyway. But it's just funny to think for how much I've played games in that series. That I just kind of never actually owned one for a really long time. Especially Brawl. I played so much Brawl for never actually owning a Wii growing up. So I originally played this with my friend Josh over his house. Because he had the 360, he had the game, and we just had like a ton of fun playing it together, and we played through it side by side. I think he got a newer model 360. For one reason or another, and then he actually gave me his old 360, which was super nice of him and super exciting when it happened. And that's actually the same 360 that just broke recently. And the only reason that I guess it even lasted as long as it did is because it did actually have a red ring pretty early on into its life. But his mom felt really bad that... Oh, hi Josh, I was literally just talking about your mom fixing the 360 for me. Because you guys gave me the 360, and then it had a red ring within like a week or two. And then your mom felt really bad, and got the Xbox sent out for me. Like, she did the whole 9 yards. Which I also did not know at the time, but I think I somehow found out later on, was also like... It was like $100. It was not free to do that for me. So that's like super duper nice of her. That she was willing to do that. Especially because, again, it lasted up until like a year or two ago. When I was playing Sonic Unleashed again, I just like, it randomly crashed in the middle of me playing. As much as battle passes and stuff are annoying, I appreciate that a lot of games are free to play if for no other reason than like player count reasons. And like convincing friends to play reasons. Because I think back to stuff even like... There's a lot of games that I probably would have been able to get a lot more people to play if they didn't have such like a high barrier to entry. That being that it costs money. And I think like an extreme case of that too is something like how like... In the Game Boy Advance days, to play multiplayer, obviously like... You needed 2 games, 2 consoles, and a link cable to play multiplayer in most games, unless they had like a cartridgeless mode. So I feel like there's just like a lot of games, like random Game Boy Advance games that I can't imagine, unless like a mom happened to buy their kid, or you know, they had multiple kids and they happened to buy both kids the same game so they could play multiplayer with it. That there's like, probably most multiplayer modes in Game Boy Advance games have never been touched before. I feel like every time I've ever messed around with a Game Boy Advance multiplayer mode, I feel like I'm touching lost media. Another cute thing I've definitely looked into before with like older YouTube videos is just me personally getting nostalgic for like a random stupid video that nobody cares about, like a random AMV that barely has any views, or like a random gaming video that barely has any views. And you go back to those videos, and a lot of the comments are like, I have so much nostalgia for this stupid video. It's always really cute seeing, like... Especially if the creators are still at least around enough that they can, like... see that people are still leaving those kind of comments on their old, like, nothing videos. But one that always comes to mind for me, for some reason, is that there was an old, like, Banjo-Kazooie stop and swap video that, like, barely had any views, and, like, it was, like, being played on a emulator horribly, like, a 2010 computer that could barely run it on an emulator that probably, like, wasn't even awfully sophisticated at the time. And it had a song in the background that I just got so stuck in my head at the time that I ended up becoming, like, a fan of the band. Back in the day when people didn't care about using copyrighted music in their videos because they weren't going to get a strike for it. And it's, like, weird music for the kind of stuff I listen to. It's a band called Bullets and Octane. The YouTube video just, like, used a random song of theirs. And I just got it stuck in my head enough that I liked the band. It made me like the band, and I, like, still follow them, like, on and off to this day. And that kind of stuff just, like, is cute when it happens. Yeah, you don't see that quite as much anymore, just because people, like, if they're trying to make any kind of money off their videos, are not putting random music in it. Which door is it? Is it this one? Yeah, okay. So that kind of segues into how I originally played this game in the first place. Because I've gone on this, like, I've at least told the story before of the fact that I had carpal tunnel at one point that was really bad. Which that was, like, really bad. Like, I don't know if I even went into just how bad it was at the time. But I was out of work for, like, 4 or 5 months. Because it started in one of my hands. Or actually what it was, I was working at Domino's at the time. And, like, my hands were getting pretty bad. Like, just because, like, on their own, I'm pretty sure just from me, like, playing stuff on my 3DS. And it just, like, adding up with time and then never quite going away because I didn't know how to take care of it properly. And there was one day at work. It was, like, I'm pretty sure it was all on the same day, where, like, I was on a shift. My boss was actually a really cool guy, so I'm not trying to say this to make it sound like he was a bad person for, like, not taking it seriously on the spot. But I think it was, like, mid-shift, and I was like, I think my hands are getting pretty bad. I might want to, like, take a week or 2 off work or something. Like, I feel like I shouldn't be using these right now, and I should get this looked at. And then, again, I'm pretty sure it was, like, the same day, like, a few days before Christmas, I went to take a pizza out of the oven, and it was, like, a lightning bolt going up my arm. Like, that was it. I was done for the day. I couldn't use that hand anymore. And I don't quite understand why, because my other hand wasn't really that bad. But my left hand followed pretty shortly afterwards. And then suddenly, I had no hands for, like, a long time. And it was very strange, because I've been pretty lucky pretty much my entire life, and I've never really gotten any serious injuries before. Whether that's, like, breaking a bone, or basically any reason that I'd have to, like, just post up at home for weeks or months or anything like that at a time. And nor did I even know how long it was going to last, because it wasn't something I, like... It's its own problem, but it's something I didn't even get a proper diagnosis for a long time. Because doctors suck, and just kind of kept tossing me around to different doctors, and... so it was hard to even get, like, a proper diagnosis, and I, like, practically still haven't. Eventually what I ended up doing was just giving up, and going to a physical therapist, and just told them that I had carpal tunnel, and then we just did carpal tunnel things for my hands. And eventually they did get better. And, like, nowadays I still do have issues with them, especially if I'm really stupid about it. Like, if I spend a lot of time on my phone, like, if I'm, like, sitting on my phone typing for, like, a while, it can start to hurt my thumb and stuff like that. Or if I use something that's, like, not particularly ergonomic. Like, if I play something like my 3DS nowadays, I have, like, a plastic hand grip that's on it, so it's, like, actually possible to use it. Anyway, to bring it back to Yume, Nikki. I was obviously, like, pretty out of commission for a while. Where I was just posted up at home kind of doing basically nothing. And it was also the middle of winter, so even stuff like just spending a bunch of time walking around, like, I had to bundle up pretty hardcore for. Which I ended up doing once or twice and actually enjoying myself. Like, walking in the winter is always something that sounds terrible, but turns out if you bundle up enough, it can be very beautiful and kind of nice. Because I need to get outside at some point. But I couldn't really play video games, which was weird for me, because that's usually what I would do as kind of my more passive thing to do. I love to do that too. Yeah, no, it was nice. Like, I don't know. It's something that I, like, look back on and I'm like, man, I should do that more. And, like, me and Whimsy have made a point to take walks from time to time still. But it's just so much mental energy, regardless. But it is always really nice when we get around to it. But anyway, the reason that I ended up playing Yume Nikki during that time, it's mostly because it's the only game I could think of. I remember watching, I want to say it was the YouTuber Jordan Underneath, who has since deleted literally all of his gaming videos because he's kind of just moved on from them. Where he did like a video, he just kind of did stuff talking about like 2000s core horror stuff, whether it was stuff that was actually made in the 2000s or things that were very reminiscent of it. Because that was before I played any horror games myself, but I still kind of liked the vibe. So it was kind of cool watching YouTubers like talking about their history with horror stuff, and it's ultimately what got me really into the idea of playing stuff like this or like Resident Evil, because they all, you know, the handful of YouTubers I followed that talked about it had a lot of really good things to say about them. So once I started diving into the genre, I was like, you know what? I should try those. And it just kind of like was on my bucket list for a really long time, and once I didn't really have hands to work with, I just kind of sat there and was like, you know what I could probably play? That game that has no dialogue, no enemies, no anything. And I think what I did is I set up a controller with Xpatter, a program that lets you like translate controller inputs to like keyboard inputs. And I put the controller on my desk and literally like rocked the joystick back and forth with like my whole hand. Because I couldn't even like grip the thumbstick. I had to like basically push it with my hand. Actually, you know, I think what I ended up having to do was I had it so the left stick was so I could make like normal movements. And then I actually set the right stick for if my hands were starting to hurt, it would just keep walking in a direction. Because it was so easy to just kind of get lost in this kind of game anyway, that if I was just going in a direction for a long time, I was like, might as well just let it do it automatically, so I'm not wearing out my hands more than I need to. But it ended up being a pretty surreal experience, honestly. Specifically playing this game when I was in the state that I was. One, because it's a very quiet, lonely game intentionally, and it was hard to really do much, you know, whether it was for myself or with people, or I wasn't working anymore. But on top of that, the game is very much so about, like, just kind of being stuck in a room, and waking up whenever, and being in that room, and then falling asleep whenever. And it, like, it hit weirdly close to home at the time. Especially because something I never really considered with, like, having to spend a lot of time kind of stuck at home with a medical thing like that is that you kind of just stop caring about when you wake up and go to sleep. Especially when there's, like, it's not like I could, like, plan my work schedule around playing games with friends online or something like that, because I wasn't really playing games. So it eventually got to a point where there's, like, maybe some days I would stay up until, like, 2 or 3 in the morning. But then there's other days where it would be, like, 6 p.m. and I would be like, you know what? It's time to sleep. I don't have anything else I want to do for the day or can do for the day, and I'm kind of just feeling sleepy, so why not? So I don't know, playing this game at the same time had just like a really similar energy to what I was going through in my life at the time, and it was comforting in a weird way for those reasons. And while a lot of people don't consider this, like, this game has always kind of been on the edge of being considered a horror game, where it has like a lot of freaky imagery. As you'll see in a moment, whenever this works, I promise I'm doing something right now. The game has a lot of freaky imagery, so it can be scary, especially for somebody like me who gets kind of wigged out by video games in general, which I've gotten better about over the years, but like especially at the time, like this game and its fan games are just so like chaotic. Whoa, I did it. Most people, if they know anything about Yume Nikki, it's probably this. I've always been like a lot more afraid of like video games than movies. And I feel like this game is kind of an interesting case study in that, because there is no like actual danger, it's just kind of imagery that you're stumbling across. But I think the thing that gets to me a lot with like horror games more than horror movies and stuff is like having the agency, like it's my step that I took that set off like, you know, something to happen. And that's the kind of thing that will freak me out about horror games. Or like I can't see around me, and that's specifically that freaks me out. And then there's areas like this, where there's no jump scares, there's nothing chasing you, there's no anything. But you just take a few steps in a direction, and then suddenly there's like weird disfigured faces on your screen. And that's the kind of thing that made me like really tiptoe around this game the first time I ever played it. Because I would just be like, a place would be freaky enough and have like a freaky enough tone and music and stuff. And then like most of the time it's like, fine, we're grooving around, sure, there's freaky hands, whatever. Sure, there's a leg. Ah, I hate this. Why did this just pop up on my screen? Like, it was really bad the first time I played it. And honestly, it was that way, like, when I finally got around to playing something like, Resident Evil for the first time. Like, I inch around those games pretty hard, too. Do you recommend this game? I'm not too good at horror stuff, and I hope it's not too scary. So, it's funny, you missed the conversation I just had where I was kind of talking about that stuff. But basically, this was essentially my first, like, horror-ish... Oh, hi, little guy. Owl. This was essentially my first, like, dipping my toes into playing a horror game. So I would recommend it if for no other reason than it is a spooky game, but it's a fairly safe game, for lack of a better way to put it. You're really not getting jump scared, like, ever. Most of like what makes you really feel unsettled about this game is really just the mood. Like if I stopped talking for a second and you just like heard this creepy ambiance with me just kind of going through it with this like 4-second music loop and like the really empty sounds of everything, it starts to get pretty unsettling, especially if you're like alone in your room playing it, just like zoned out at the dark screen. But there's nothing in the game that's like inherently just gonna like pop out and scream at you or anything. There's a couple of moments where things pop up on screen a little faster than you'd expect. And almost the fact that it's as random as it is like part of what makes it freakier, especially before you get more familiar with the game. Because everything you come across, you're like, oh boy, is this gonna be a thing that like freaks the hell out of me? Like, what fucking room did I just walk in? You know? Like, sometimes you just stumble across something like this. And I know that there's nothing going on in here. But I remember the first time I found this room, I just saw that creepy thing that was kind of hard to see because it was dark in here, and the music got really loud and intense. And I just noped the fuck back out of there. But realistically, you really can just kind of take it at your own pace. And nothing's going to hurt you, and I think importantly with it too, like, the horror is very random, but it's also very unique in a way where it doesn't usually feel like it's just kind of throwing like traditional it's not just throwing like traditional horror tropes at you or trying to make any kind of weird story. It's literally just art that's made to make you feel. And I think that's why this game stood out to me so much. And even beyond that, I think this game made me realize, because for the longest time I was not a particularly big person when it came to horror. Like, I pretty much noped right out of it. Even something like Resident Evil 4 used to scare the shit out of me just because horror, anything, like just the fact that there was a spooky mood and the enemies were freaky and moving around and I couldn't see them. Like, even just something like that would get to me really bad. But I think what playing this game made me realize is that I don't like horror, or I don't like the feeling of being scared, necessarily. But what I do like is games that have extremely good atmosphere. And that goes for non-horror stuff. Like, that's just always been one of my highest priorities when it comes to video games that I like playing. Is that I really, really, really like it when the atmosphere, like whether it's like the, you know, the music or the level design or whatever, all coming together and just like really sucking you into the world with that kind of stuff. That's like arguably one of my like top priorities when it comes to like games. Like, a game can get by for me surprisingly just on vibes alone if like the atmosphere is good enough and the music and everything is good enough. And this game made me just realize that like horror doesn't have to be about scaring yourself. It can just be about the fact that you can make really, really beautiful places that are just creepy, and like the creepiness is part of what makes them beautiful, and that's like fine. It can be like more to push yourself through, but it's like it's still beautiful, and it's still a really amazing genre for good atmosphere. I basically went from playing Yume Nikki. I want to say I played Yume Tuki afterwards, I forget. But then I also played the Resident Evil remake for the first time. And that is one of the most gorgeous games that I've ever seen. And that was a really, really good next step into horror. I think I need to think more about atmosphere more in general. I think, for me, I think the reason atmosphere has always been like... Oh, wait, okay, hold on. This is one of... Speaking of atmosphere, this is like one of my favorite areas in the game. Anyway, when it comes to atmosphere, I think a big thing for me growing up, and I've talked about this before with like the way that I listen to music with like a really heavy focus on atmosphere and stuff like that. Like I like listening to like music that fits the rain if I'm out taking a walk while it's raining out, like that kind of thing. I think I just always like put a lot of value in that as far back as I can remember. And things like a really good, like, winter level would make me feel really positive, wintry thoughts. And I just latched onto that a lot. And I think I played some games that were really good about that growing up. Like, Banjo-Kazooie has a lot of really good atmosphere. Ocarina of Time, surprisingly, has, like, a lot of really good atmosphere and sound design and stuff like that. And I think I just realized pretty quickly that that kind of thing, while it's not always my top priority, it is something I value a lot in games that I care about. I say as I stare at an extremely beautiful thing in a game that I care about. This game is the reason of my love of surrealism. Yeah, definitely that was a big thing for me too. I don't think I ever thought that hard about like how beautiful surrealism could be until I played through a game like this where it's very like front and center on how weird things can really come together into a really beautiful experience. It is one thing that's really cool about this game though, is just that it's like there's so much stuff to see that just doesn't matter. At least in the grand scheme of like the goal, quote unquote. Which is kind of why I was saying earlier why I feel like to really get into these games, like you just kind of have to have that intrinsic value of like, I just want to see stuff, whatever silly stuff it wants to throw at me. I feel like that mindset, like since I played Yume Nikki, has honestly like changed the way I think about a lot of games. Like, not that I didn't already... Like I said earlier, like, atmosphere is something that I appreciate a lot in games. But it's definitely just kind of reframed, like, even just, like, pointless dead ends or, like, little world details and stuff like that, where I'm like, I'm glad I stumbled across this little corner that didn't matter. Like, I feel like I have a lot more moments like that nowadays. You mentioned you're not the biggest fan of horror games, but what about horror movies? I don't watch them, like, super duper often. But I feel like most of the time when I've watched them, I've, like, generally liked the vibe more. I think the big thing with me... I don't dislike horror games. I think I just dislike horror games when literally all that they're trying to do is scare you. Because the atmosphere is, like, where my priorities are with them. But I think a lot of the reason that games scare me more is just because there's so much agency with them. Like, I'm the one that's moving the character around. In horror movies, the fact that things are just gonna happen no matter what usually doesn't get to me as badly. As far as, like, the moment-to-moment, like, visceral horror. I can still get in my head about what's going on, because usually what's going on isn't super pleasant, but, like... it doesn't get to me the same way that horror games do because of that. Although, ironically, my friend Josh, we've talked about it before, and he's like basically the opposite. Where like, because he doesn't have agency over the characters, it like freaks him out a little bit more. And then horror games don't get to him like at all, because he's like, I'm just doing my thing. It's like, whatever. And also now I have met so many people because of this game, 2K and LSD Dream Emulator. I feel like one of my big takeaways from like doing the early streaming stuff that I did on like Twitch, because like, there's definitely ways that games kind of like have tiers to the way that people care about them. And I think I kind of lucked out with a few of the games that I cared about being games that, like, have a small dedicated community of people that will want to swing by streams for stuff like this. Because, like, I played some games that I was like, who the hell is going to show up to the Afro Samurai stream? Like, how does that even show up? Like, there's nobody searching that in... It might have been 2020, 2021 when I first did that. There's nobody searching that, so nobody's going to come across me that way. And if anybody does come across my stream, maybe it was like a random recommendation on their feed or something. Do they care that much about swinging, like sticking around? I have no idea. Or do they have anything to say? I have no idea. But then there's games like Yume and BlazBlue is probably the other really big one for me, where like a lot of people found me through BlazBlue just because it hit that sweet spot of being like not so obscure that nobody actually, like, straight up nobody would care about searching it out of the blue, because it just got so lost to time as a game. But not having, like, such a huge community that it kind of got lost in the search results a little bit, where, like, there's definitely games that are big enough that I'm not really expecting that I'm going to be coming near the top of the search list or anything. But something like these games that just have like a really dedicated community of people who care about it, or BlazBlue, which is like a perfect middle ground of a fighting game where it has a very dedicated competitive community, but also there's like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people streaming it at a time. So I'm going to be one of those people. And it's not like I did that intentionally, but I'd be lying if it didn't feel like a little bit of a life hack as far as like actually having people swing by my streams where I was like, oh shit. People will watch fighting games. Neat. And also, I like playing fighting games. And also, it's fun playing with people who swing by. I think I've probably hinted at this once or twice, where I worked delivery for a while, and obviously that, like, puts a number on your foot anyway, because you're literally spending who knows how many hours a day driving. And at the same time, it was when I was like in the heat of doing all of like my Smash tournaments and stuff, which I think I was probably going to like a minimum of once a week, if not like 2 or maybe even 3 on the right week. But I was like already a half an hour to a 40-minute drive away from all those tournaments, and I usually carpooled to pick up a bunch of friends that added like another 30, 40 minutes to each of those drives, like there and back. So it was probably like a minimum of 30 to 40 hours of straight driving a week I was doing at one point. And that was close to 10 years ago at this point, and I have had weird issues with my right foot ever since. Hey, how's it going? Wanted to see who won the sub lottery. Do I know who that is? I don't know if that's somebody that's
Oh, just because they gifted a sub.
Yeah, no, I know. I was just like looking at the name. I don't know if that's a bot. Because I made the fatal mistake at one point of posting the word commission on Twitter, where it immediately floods you with like 10,000 bots. And if they see, like, sometimes with that, like, if they see like a Twitch link in your description, they'll like immediately follow the Twitch link. And I was like, I don't know. It's possible that that one's not, but I think even if... Wait, hold on. Yeah, even when you click on their name, their banner is like, commissions open, and I'm like, is that a bot? It's one of those things where I want to say that I can feel that stuff out pretty well. But, like, God forbid the one time I, like, call somebody out for it, and then and then I'm like an asshole for, like, for somebody genuinely reaching out to me because they wanted to help me with commissions or something, but doing stuff like that is always, like, really fishy. like having these like hardcore commission open type things on your Twitch profile like that. And it's always like a pretty simple like anime style, so I'm like, I don't know.
It's only gonna get harder with AI now too.
Yeah. Because that's what I even assume usually when whenever I see, like, even with the way that the, like, anytime I see something I assume that's a bot, they'll do things that are, like, surprisingly human, but then I think about it and I'm like, nah, there's no way. You're just, like, you're just a smart bot, where, like, they'll, like, edit typos, like, they'll make a typo in their post and they'll go back and edit it, or they'll take, like, a suspiciously long time to, like, respond to something, or they'll, like, log out for half a day, and, like, I'm like, I see what you're doing. I'm still pretty sure you're a bot. Yeah. Oh man, I thought your commissions were open.
It kind of makes me think like how many human behaviors that people would just think are like bot-like if they were given the context of this person might be a bot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They follow a strict routine, or they intentionally deviate from that routine. You know, stuff like that.
Squirrels don't fall for such tricks. I have learned my lessons the hard way on the internet. I thankfully learned pretty early on about, like, phishing attempts and suspicious links and stuff like that in, like, the least consequential way ever, which was losing my Gaia Online account. Like, I'm glad it was nothing more serious than that, but it's like, oh, okay. People will do this. Keep an eye out for it. Basically, don't trust anybody unless you have, like, a semi-real relationship with them. Like, even if it's just getting to know them for a little bit in a way that feels real. You trust me? Yes, I trust you. Wow, Drek, you're a really sophisticated bot. I had no idea. No, my Gaia Online account.
Not again.
Not again.
It's kind of funny that the most recent like scam attempt that I got was a friend of mine's dad on Facebook contacted me, which, you know, sometimes relatives will just contact you out of the blue, or not relatives, but people you know will contact you out of the blue just to say, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
So I didn't think anything of it.
No, those are the super gross ones. I've seen those before too.
Yeah.
Where, like, they'll hack somebody's account and then send messages from that account.
Yeah. And they use poor grammar, but it's like, well, you know, it is an older person, like above 60. I'm not gonna suspect that they're using poor grammar because they've been hacked immediately.
Yeah, yeah.
It's most likely just because they're old and don't know how to type too good. He asked me, hello, how's the John, how's the family? And I say, good, you know, they're doing okay. Here, I can actually pull up the exact wording that they used. I'm doing pretty good. I just bought a truck with my new grant. How's life treating you? And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I just say, oh, it's going all right. Good to hear from you. Did you not watch the HR news about the Extra Space New Year grant? Help and support for the new program going on or not?
Oh my god. And then you're like,
And then I stop responding because that's like, oh.
Yeah. Like, there's no good thing at that point. Either it's it's like obviously a bot taking over an account, or two, it's obviously a scam. Like MLM style, like, oh god, what did you fall? Yeah, that'd be worse. If it was actually them and they just fell for a very obvious, like, loan scam. And we're trying to, like, push something onto you. Like, pyramid scheme style. And it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
You're so liquid. Something I'm definitely excited for, actually, is next week. I've basically been, like, half working boring retail stocking at Target because they pay surprisingly well for something like that, and half working at a new job I've had doing, like, some social media stuff, as well as just, like, general, like, tech, helping with advertising, design, all that stuff. And they have liked what I've been doing there, because they keep giving me more hours. And next week I start, like, splitting my days up with more hours there than at Target. Which is nice both for, like, I don't know, more fulfilling job reasons. And for body reasons, because I've just kind of always had some issues with, like, my hands and my right foot and stuff like that, so the less I can be off my feet, the better. Hope that goes well, and yeah, more fulfilling was I was thinking. Yeah, no, that's really the big thing. Honestly, I don't necessarily, like, mind, like, lower key jobs. Like, I still stand by the fact that, like, unfortunately, one of the most fulfilling jobs I've ever had was, like, delivering pizza in my hometown. Because, it sounds so, like, silly and lame, but my hometown was, like, a really nice, like, tourist trappy, like, seaside town. So I basically got paid to drive around a beautiful town for a living. And I'll basically never get something like that again, unless I literally move back to the same town and, oh my gosh, do the same job. But since then, like, I've done more, like, retail-y type stuff. And I don't necessarily mind them if I feel like I'm making a difference, like, in some way. And with Target, it feels like, for lack of a better term, I beat the job. Like, I basically, like, I came into the job, I organized, like, all the back rooms, because I pretty instantly proved that I could, like, do that kind of stuff. And my boss there, or at least, like, the supervisor of my department, instantly trusted me a lot with, like, what I was capable of when it came to organizing stuff like that. I was like, can you do it for another department? And then I did it for that, too. And now it's just every time I go there, it's like, put the stuff out, leave, put the stuff out, leave. There's nothing more interesting to do or contribute, because at that point it's like everything's clean and running smooth. But a small business, where I'm helping them actually grow, and also helping them with a lot of tech stuff that they don't understand. Not that I'm like the IT department by any means, but even just getting stuff like I helped them like upgrade a hard drive pretty recently, and that was pretty like earth-shattering considering how bad the computer with the bad hard drive was. So they were like, wow, that was important. And I'm like, yeah, I feel important. My job has been busier as I've been getting more responsibility, but I've been feeling more satisfied, so I think that's a good trade-off. Helping to research new technologies for my business, to use with a small team, seeing if I can get... Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's honestly, like, something I basically value in, like, all the jobs that I've had, other than the pizza delivery thing, because that was just, again, that was just driving around a pretty area, so, and that's just, like, totally my style, so I like that. But every other job I've had, I've basically prioritized, like, I like making things easier for everybody else, like, and I feel like I have, like, at least a half-decent sense of, like, trying to make things intuitive for people. So, like, they don't have to, like, because I could obviously design something for myself that I know how to use. And would maybe technically be better than, like, you know, something that's more designed for everybody to use. But also, not everybody is as technical or I don't know, even just something like organization. Like, if I organize something all stupid that makes sense to me, I'm not about to, like, train everybody on how to do that. So, like, I like making things more intuitive out the gate to kind of help people out in any way that I can. So, like, in retail, the equivalent to that would be even just making the back room... Wait, where am I going? Even just making the back rooms feel more organized so everybody else can work in them better. Like, makes me feel like I'm contributing something in a more tangible way than just making the shelves look nice. I think, like, I'm never gonna, like, pretend or think so highly of myself to be like, I'm an ultra-skilled gamer. But I do at least think of moments in my life that kind of, more literally leveled me up when it comes to, like, my skill with games in general. And the fact that I've had so much fun with this combat system, and the fact that it's so, like, it just keeps, like, building you up and up and up with, like, the moves that you have, the style system, the difficulties that you can just kind of keep climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing, I think was like a pretty big part of like just kind of helping me like get more technical with the games that I played. I think in general, I just like games that have like a really, really good sense of control. Like not like just that they have good controls, but like they kind of let you do whatever you want whenever you think about it. Without much like restriction behind it. Like how you can kind of like jump cancel any move in this game so you can move around however you want kind of thing. Like I think that does more to like make me better at games than a game that's like really restrictive in what it lets you do when. Because I think the first moment where I ever like really had like a bit of like an epiphany like that was playing the Mega Man games for the first time. Because those games are kind of really stiff, but at the same time, it's a very precise game with how you can move around. Like, it's not floaty at all. And I was kind of like, I can be where I want, when I want. And I know exactly how to take, like, the exact pixels to get to the next step. And that kind of stuff went, like, a really long way for me, I think.
Yeah. I love games where it doesn't rely on introducing you to new mechanics for you to, like, feel the,
like, how much you're improving in them.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like the level up comes from, like, a literal level up in your brain.
Exactly,
like, you're not getting experience points, you're getting literal experience getting better at the game. I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason fighting games spoke to me so much.
Yeah,
because they're the PvP version of that, so like where there's like you have a lot of control of what you're doing, all the information's right in front of you. Like as far as like you know exactly what resources are at play. I still like playing shooters a lot, but I feel like they play into that like looser sense of like, well, was it my fault or was it my teammates? Well, I couldn't see that, so I didn't really get the jump on that. Like you know. It wasn't like a straightforward interaction. It was like, ah, shit, I didn't even get a chance to do anything.
That's why shooters that are based around single-player mechanics, especially, are really fun for that. Like Neon White, Ultra Kill.
Oh, like games that are just like full single-player experiences.
Yeah, because there are a lot of shooters like that where it's like, here you can do shit that you couldn't necessarily do in a single-player game.
Yeah.
Or not that arena shooters are around as much anymore, but like shit like Unreal Tournament and Quake, those had really like fun 1v1 scenes, you know?
Yeah. Ordered a new phone yesterday since mine is fairly old and keeps doing weird stuff like not ringing on a call or alarm or randomly close. Oh, that's super annoying. New phones are exciting though, other than having to drop usually upwards of several $100s out of nowhere. But it's always exciting to get better hardware. My thing with phones and tech in general is like, especially in like the current year, but even as early as like 2016 or so, we've kind of gotten to the point with tech where for the most part, it's like, it's very cheap to get something that like does normal things basically perfectly. Like especially when it comes to laptops. Like if you have like an okay processor, 8 gigs of RAM, and a solid state hard drive, that should be more than enough for your computer to do like super normal like web browser, video watching, you know, spreadsheet, that kind of stuff. And it's kind of the same thing with phones, where like if you put down like somewhere in like the $150 to $200 range, unless you're specifically trying to do something crazy on it, like use it as like a mini gaming device, or something else hardcore that for some reason needs a lot of processing power, you just kind of like don't need a phone that's better than that. So it blows my mind that like, or I mean, I shouldn't say it blows my mind. It's gross to me how much like the big companies still present to like the average person that they need to like go in debt for 2 years over like the new big fancy phone. Hey, welcome on in. Someone at work calls me and the other squirrels, yeah. It's always really funny when people just kind of use that as like a... Like, I'll always like hear people just describe somebody as like acting squirrely or being a squirrel. Like when they're like, that's just like an adjective that people describe people with. And it's hard not to be like, hee hee. Am I? Random funny story that I actually just remembered. Like the whole like, hello, follow me thing is kind of like an iconic part of the series. Because obviously that's how you do what I just did, where you like get people to follow you around so you can bring them to safety. And a long time ago, back when I used to have, I think actually the laptop that I originally played this remake on, basically any time that I used to get laptops, I would put in like a big Redbubble order for just like a bunch of stickers that I would actually care about, because Redbubble, for the most part, just had a lot of people uploading official art that they shouldn't be uploading. But it did make it so that I could get some really cool stickers, so I ended up ordering a lot of them that way. And I had one for Oddworld. I almost wonder if it's still like on the site, because they've taken a lot of stuff down over the years for copyright reasons. But there was a period of time where they had one that was just like a red or a blue and green outline, you know, made to be like Abe and one of the other like Mudakan followers. And then it was just the text, hello, hello, follow me, okay? And I would bring that laptop to, I already went there. I'd bring that laptop to college. And there was one day where I brought it in, and like some just random student that was there asked if it was supposed to be like some commentary on social media of people just like pointlessly asking for followers. And I was just like, no, nah, it's a video game reference. I'm sorry, it's not that deep. Just like the good old days of trick-or-treating, which is not a thing I can do now. I did get the chance to relive it at least a tiny bit, though, when I worked, what's it called? When I worked Domino's. Because not only could you dress up on Halloween, but they heavily encouraged it. So it was literally just me driving around to, like, just houses all over town while they're doing, like, Halloween parties. And it was really dang cute. Although it was always very silly to be, like, in full costume, Domino's uniform, bringing somebody their pizza, and then for them to, like, just straight face through it. Not that anybody's obligated to give a reaction to something like that, but you go there in costume and you expect it to be a conversation starter at least. And at least a handful of times every year that I would do that, at least a couple of houses would be like, oh, you want some candy? And I'm like, yeah, I would love to trick-or-treat.